Welcome to episode 697 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and while I did try to stay on vacation for a few weeks, it didn't really work out. More like hours or days. Laporta, Deco, and company had different ideas for me. So to break down all the news that's going on this week, it is Ruri Barlow of Football España. Ruri, I feel like, vacations aren't really real in our industry. Of course they're not, but you always have that little buzz in the background. I'll just ask you, how's your summer going at least?
Yeah, not too bad. I've actually been back home in Scotland for 2 weeks, so I had a wedding to attend, not my own. But yes, that was nice to get out of the heat a little bit because I came back to Madrid on Wednesday night, and I can tell you it's currently 36 degrees Celsius. You might, there's a possibility Dan can do the calculations there, but it's very hot in Madrid right now. So yeah, just trying to survive basically.
Well, I actually say I completely empathize because it was exactly 32 degrees Celsius or 89 degrees Fahrenheit yesterday when I was at an outdoor festival, and then the sky opened up and my girlfriend and I were just completely flooded out of the festival. We wind up leaving, and yeah, we're soaking wet on the subway, and it was still a nice time, but it was still as hot and humid as it could possibly have been, which is a good transition actually, because where we begin is somewhere where FC Barcelona is not. But technically I am, because the Club World Cup is here in the United States. So Barcelona not playing in the Club World Cup. So that's why I really haven't done any streams on Big Up. You haven't really heard me talking too much about it. But being here in the U.S. for it, it does kind of put one eye at least towards next year's international stuff with the World Cup here in Mexico and Canada in 2026. But I will say, with the Club World Cup, I've been tuning in here or there. I did watch the Inter Miami game yesterday. Of course, Messi doing free kick Messi things. But with Barcelona not playing in it, yes, it doesn't, it can kind of be a distraction for me, but I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Like, the only downside I can conceive of for Barcelona is the incredible numbers that are being awarded to winning teams, and even just the teams participating in terms of just moolah, in terms of money. So I don't see any of the downsides of Barcelona not participating in this, but do you feel like, I know that the numbers and people, again, I will say that attendance-wise, that if you have matches on Monday afternoon during the workday here in the United States, it's really tough for a lot of people to go to those games and fill those stadiums and the ticket prices as well. And it's also, to this point, pretty gosh darn hot when it comes to the U.S. right now in the weeks that this is going on, humidity-wise, and getting people out into a stadium. It's real tough to even get those tickets to go off the shelves in the last few hours or days before the matches. So, yeah, a lot not really going right for the Club World Cup, but it does feel you can see a little bit of nuggets, I think, already, of the Club World Cup becoming something that people care about or matter. But for now, do you think Barcelona fans should be happy that they're not participating and then maybe worry about participating in the future?
Yeah, on the one hand, you can look at it and say the money would be a big boost, but I think for Barcelona, this is probably the best thing that could have happened to them, because they will have a month extra off, basically, and you can argue whether the merits of Lamine Yamal spending some of his summer with Neymar Jr. is perhaps less stressful than being at the Club World Cup might have been. But yeah, I think if you look at Real Madrid and Atleti, I mean, Atleti are on the verge of going out with one group game to go. They need to beat Botafogo by 3 goals. So that's going to be quite a kind of disappointing morale, kind of destroying come home if they do end up coming home early. Similar to Real Madrid, I mean, the aim, if you win it, you get quite a significant amount of money. I think for Real Madrid, who are the top earning team, if they do win it, that'll be 150 million. So that's no small fry, but Real Madrid will still have to find a way to spend that. And also there is the possibility, if you go out in the semi-finals, I don't know quite what that is in terms of their finances, but it doesn't really help them much. And I think Xabi Alonso, certainly if you asked him, he would rather be seeing his players relaxing as well and giving himself a little bit more time to kind of prepare for the next season. And especially for Barcelona, who came off this season competing very well, but with a very short squad, as we saw with Gerard Martin and Eric Garcia at fullback. Nobody could have predicted that at the start of the season. So yeah, it gives their squad a little bit more time to kind of relax and take it easy.
Well, yeah, we got the first look at Xabi Alonso's Real Madrid. Not much to take away, honestly, from the one game they played so far when we're recording this. Aside from me watching that and thinking that whether it was Ancelotti, whether it's Xabi Alonso, Real Madrid, something they could use that 150 million on if they win it all is probably a holding midfielder, somebody to control the game, because that still seems to be the thing that they are missing. And you can bring in as many young players as you want, but it just doesn't seem like they have that profile. And it continues to be that thing that I think Real Madrid are missing, which to me, again, it's not a bad thing from Barcelona's sense, but it's early days in Xabi Alonso stuff. But without a certain profile, I don't know how much he can change.
Yeah, it's particularly grating for Alonso. The one thing he's missing, bear in mind how many videos you see of him kind of stroking the ball about in training, playing these lovely passes, is Xabi Alonso. Xabi Alonso would be kind of the perfect fit for Real Madrid right now. So yeah, that must be particularly irritating for him. I mean, I'll say this, Hansi Flick invented holding midfielders last season. I don't think anybody saw Frenkie de Jong and Pedri being at the base of their midfield. Marc Casado was a non-factor for most people. Probably, I think Barcelona expected him to leave last summer. So yeah, you don't know where it will come from, but Alonso, certainly it seems to be that's the one thing he's missing. And the word currently from Marca, at least, is that Real Madrid are looking at it and saying, we know there's an issue here, we know there's a problem, but without spending 100 to 150 million, there's very few options on the market to try and go and get that midfielder. And that's ultimately the problem that Barcelona face as well. I mean, when Sergio Busquets went, it took them 2 or 3 years to kind of reconfigure their midfield, and it's only now just kind of really working in the fashion that you'd kind of expect of Barcelona. Obviously, they had the league win under Xavi, but that was with 4 midfielders trying to kind of cover across with Busquets in it. So yeah, it's a tricky task for Alonso, and I think that is the number one issue on his agenda to kind of resolve.
There is a world, I think, 10 years from now when we're talking about even this team right now that you would say Lamine Yamal, Cubarsí, and I know he's still coming off that ACL injury. I'm not trying to put all of the pressure of the world on him, but there's a world where Marc Bernal 10 years from now, it's like that player was essential. That player is necessary for the modern game and the way that things are being played. So yeah, absolutely. And I will say Barcelona, though, they are going on that tour in Japan and South Korea in the middle of July. So sometimes they come to the US, sometimes again, they jump into the Asian market. So it's not like Barcelona are not going out and getting on flights and putting some early preseason miles on their legs. But that said, they've done it before, and it's something I think that the players, after a little bit of rest, should be able to handle. Now, the other little nugget I want to jump in before we really get into the meat of this episode is there are very much like last summer, very few moves being made around the edges of the Liga. And of course, July 1st, you expect things to really start to pick up. But the good news, I think, is for the relegated sides. Las Palmas has Albert Melero going to Villarreal and Raul Moro, a former La Masia player, going from Real Valladolid to Ajax. And those are 2 moves that I think are perfect for those players. Raul Moro was clearly the only bright side that I think Real Valladolid really had last season. And then Melero getting relegated, it feels weird because Las Palmas just, again, Mika Marmol, and they just have so many players. You're like, how is that team relegated? But that's what happens as a result. If you can't stop the ball from going to the back of the net, you get relegated. And Villarreal, as far as Melero goes, we don't know about Alex Baena and his future. It feels like he's going to the EPL, and this move for Villarreal is preemptive to knowing that they're losing Baena, which I think would be a huge loss for the Liga at this point. But Melero could, I think, like for like, is the best replacement they could possibly found.
Yeah, certainly in terms of kind of pedigree, talent, in terms of the way that certainly Spain's youth international sides have looked at it, the under-21s, under-19s, Molero has been kind of the next person coming in. He comes in on the left-hand side as well. He can kind of cut in on his right. I think he is a bit of a different player from Baena. He's less kind of dynamic in some senses. I think he likes the ball at his feet a little bit more, dribbles a bit more, tries to kind of break down teams, whereas Baena, it's kind of 2 touches. Am I shooting? Am I passing? Kind of, let's get rid of this ball as quickly as I can. But I think the interesting thing will be, especially from a Barcelona perspective, is if Atleti, who are the kind of main contenders for Baena's signature, can get that deal over the line, because Atleti are the perfect fit for Baena because they're a team. Well, stylistically, that remains to be seen. But in terms of making a jump to a bigger team that can challenge, that can go after trophies, that will be in the Champions League, and Baena will have enough kind of credit, I think, for him to be given at least 1 or 2 of the keys on their kind of keychain. So yeah, I think Baena to Atleti would be a no-brainer move for Atleti, and I don't really understand why other teams aren't in for them. And if Barcelona weren't so stocked with midfielders, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd gone for them. Money and space all being allowed for.
Yeah, they were linked with him 2 years ago now, but I think both his price and, again, as you said, need. That's like the one position they absolutely don't need, where Fermin Lopez is in transfer rumors this week because there seems to be a little bit of a logjam, especially with them looking as hard at Nico Williams as they would. Then where's Rafinha going to start if you're going to start all three of them, plus Lewandowski and all those things? Now, I will say, when we're talking about transfers, again, we have yet to mention Joan Garcia. We've yet to mention Nico Williams. We'll get to that in a second. I promise, at the speed of the episode. But I want to kind of take a moment here to remind people to be vigilant in these coming weeks, especially leading up to July 1st, about linked names. In the last 4 days, we have seen Kevin Lamonaco, the 23-year-old center back for Independiente in Argentina, linked to the club. We have seen Roony Bardghji, the 19-year-old right winger at Copenhagen, who was injured for almost all of last season, recovered from a major knee injury, came back in March. And then Mikkel Burl Hansen, a 16-year-old Danish striker at Bodo Glimt, and he's also been linked heavily to the club in the last few days. And a lot of the times, even if it's journalists you trust, because the Bardghji rumor came from Fabrizio Romano, but Porto already sent a bid in 2 weeks ago. So that story, just on the surface, feels like there is, agents and Romano kind of doing some agents a little bit of a favor for information down the road about other potential players or things to kind of boost his stock a little bit by linking a name like Barcelona to him. Same thing with, again, a 23-year-old center back in Argentina and Lamonaco. He's right-footed. And do Barcelona need another right-footed center back? Even if they're going to ship a few out, we'll get to that at the end of the episode. But even if they ship a few right-footed center backs out, is that really truly a need that they have on that side? Because when the minute I heard that link, I was like, all right, this guy left-footed, checked, watched some tape of him, all these different things. And then, of course, the 16-year-old Danish striker, that's a different story. I think that, there's a little bit of something to that. But it's also like, if you're going to spend, how much money is it going to be already in a what do you call it, an auction for a 16-year-old striker, and that's a tough market for Barcelona potentially wanting to get into if their FFP is that limited. So where does he go in terms of your first team wage bill? I don't think that's where he was signed for, but it sounds like he'd already get first team football somewhere else. So all three of those, real quick, I throw a little bit of water on them, even though, again, it's Fabrizio Romano saying it, and it's respected journalists that we know. So I don't know. For me, Ruri, I don't know about you, but at least I get some joy out of getting, maybe because I like football homework, because I'm a lot better at football homework than I was at actual math homework. Not too great at actual math homework, but pretty good at football homework. And maybe I just enjoy seeing new names linked to Barcelona. It means I get to dive into players that I don't really know about that might be exciting in the future. But I don't know. You have to do all of the Liga. And is it difficult to keep up with that? And what is kind of your process of saying, all right, I'm going to throw cold water on this one, but maybe there's something to this one?
What you're touching on is the driving force behind the football media over the last 2-3 years, and the kind of transition to the Fabrizio Romano economy of transfers, transfer rumors. It's that excitement. It's that kind of enthusiasm of what if we get this guy in, and what if he is amazing? You can go from the smallest clubs in Spain or across Europe to kind of the biggest clubs, and even kind of Roony Bardghji. I'm going to murder the pronunciation here. Is it Bardghji? Bardghji? I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce that, but yes, a player who nobody who has been covering Barcelona kind of regularly has watched kind of 10 games of Bardghji kind of back to back. Kind of nobody's watching him every week in, week out until kind of the last kind of few weeks. So to give a kind of normal assessment on him is quite difficult. But I think from my point of view, in terms of kind of what we're covering, you generally look at the fit. Does this make sense with previous deals? Does this make sense with the kind of transfer policy? Does this make sense with kind of links that agents and kind of sporting directors have? And then you kind of put together a puzzle, and you kind of give it not necessarily a rating, but you kind of assess, could this happen? Are there pieces in place for a deal here? And yeah, with Barcelona, I think, especially those bigger clubs, it's harder and harder with those kind of younger players, because the younger players, they're going for the affordable money. They don't necessarily need to play in the first team. Whereas now, increasingly, I think it's harder for people or agents to sell those kind of big transfer rumors of 50, 60 million players, unless it makes sense. So yeah, I think the world of football is kind of wising up to what's happening and what's going on. But again, it's part of the excitement of it is what comes in and what happens in the summer, because it's you're selling hope essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I should actually do a better job here. Of course, we're talking about the Kuwait-born Swedish next Messi. Of course, that's what we're talking about. I also want to throw out some other stuff for the algorithm. Of course, is Messi going to come back to Barcelona? We saw his free kick yesterday with Inter Miami. So I just want to make sure we're getting a little bit of those kind of morsels here because I'm not very good at going viral. It's maybe the thing I'm worst at. So maybe I need to do a little bit better at that because I even made a YouTube video that came out yesterday morning from a podcast that came out Wednesday night about Joan Garcia. And it's so striking to me that I'm very excited about this transfer. It seems like Kool-Aid's across the board are very excited about the transfer, but the numbers on it were terrible. People just didn't care because he's already signed. He's a 24-year-old goalkeeper that's coming from Español. And I think the people that are more in tuned, like, again, friend of the show, Barlow, was saying how he was really in his personal life having fun with his Español friends because they seem to be the ones that are creating more, we'll say, online traffic and buzz about this transfer than the Barcelona fans even. And I think part of that is that Barcelona's success in this transfer, to me, again, a 25 million euro release clause for a 24-year-old goalkeeper that, at least on paper, sure, again, another friend of the show in Domagoy broke down all of his saves and things he could have done. But to me, young goalkeepers like that, under 27 goalkeepers like that, you just don't know. And he was arguably the best in Spain last season, at least numerically. And 25 million euros for maybe your goalkeeper the next 10 years is a very affordable price. So on paper, to me, this seems like a 10 of 10 transfer because I do consider the business related to Ter Stegen and a possible exit for him to be separate for the club because the timelines are just so different. And I mean, I don't know about you. You watch him in Español. Is there any counter argument as to this not being I'll use another sports analogy here, but a home run signing for Barcelona?
Yeah, it's impressive that they managed to get it done because, yeah, like you say, I mean, obviously the presence of Ter Stegen is a different matter, but to convince Garcia to come is kind of a big boon for Barcelona, I think. I mean, you look at the other sides that are interested and you don't necessarily know what they're offering in terms of starting guarantees, in terms of money, in terms of how kind of aggressive they've been in their kind of moves. But for Barcelona to essentially, if things go well, and the signs are that this could go very well, get a goalkeeper for the next kind of 5 to 10 years and bring that in for that kind of price range is very, very good. Very good business. I mean, you look at Liverpool, who signed Mamardashvili from Valencia, who's probably, in terms of kind of progress, in terms of where he is in his career, not dissimilar level to Joan Garcia, and he's costing them an extra 10 million. And Mamardashvili, I think you could argue, is slightly less well-rounded than Joan Garcia based on what we've seen. We've seen it for less time. Granted, it's only a season. I think that's the big doubt, is that Joan Garcia's career so far has happened very quickly. In the space of 18 months, he's become a starter at Español, won promotion to La Liga, become a star player for Español, and now he's going to go from being kind of peppered with shots all the time and doing a very good job, but in a kind of low pressure environment in some senses because you're a relegation contender and you're going into Barcelona, which is the big leagues, but also you're going to face a very different kind of type of game for Joan Garcia, where his contributions are limited to 3 or 4 a game. It depends on how he is one-on-one and the kind of command of his box. I think a little bit more than it would at Español, where shot stopping, he's going to face a lot of shots, and that's probably where he excels most. But like you said, it's very hard to find faults. There's no original take on this one. It's just a good signing. It makes sense for Barcelona, and at the price point it was at, you have to give credit to Deco and Joan Laporta and Hansi Flick for saying this makes total sense right now. Let's not hang fire just because we can with Ter Stegen.
Yeah, no, the only thing that the Ter Stegen part of it is the thing that maybe doesn't make sense when you look at the wage bill because of how much Ter Stegen makes. And not to say that I've defended his contract situation, but remember, the number is so high because of the deferred payments that he had during COVID. So it's not like it was, they'll say, Ter Stegen's fault. And I know a lot of people always want you to be a good servant of the club and leave, but Ter Stegen for a long time has said, I want to be at Barcelona. That's where I want to be. And I did kind of maybe I had my come to Jesus moment on Wednesday on the stream, kind of in live time, where I feel myself changing my tune. I think it went under the radar that Chesney has not yet signed his contract extension. He has till June 30th to do that. And I think where I'm changing my tune on Ter Stegen's exodus is that because they can't force him out, and maybe they are dangling the carrot of, yes, the 2026 World Cup, but it just sounds like Germany is going to start him regardless and say, you are our number one guy. And obviously he's sticking around, I would assume Hansi Flick is going to have him. at least splitting time with Garcia, if not still have the starting job and having to kind of force Garcia to win it and take it from him. Because as you mentioned, we are very excited about Garcia, yes, but Garcia with an entirely different level of focus required, with an entirely different level and team and a high line and all those different things, that it's a different way of playing for him. So if his adaptation period, which again, a 24-hour goalkeeper, you got to give him a minute to adapt. If it doesn't go well, then Ter Stegen will be the starter when the season begins. He is a captain and all those things. So maybe it is. We know that Iñaki Peña is likely gone anyway, regardless. But maybe that Szczęsny and Iñaki Peña are gone. The one thing, however, is that whether Barcelona want it or not, yes, you don't pay a backup goalkeeper in Ter Stegen his wages. That obviously doesn't happen. But that might just be the situation they are in, because as you know, with all the pandemic contracts and the issues that Barcelona had financially, that a lot of it was overplayed, of course, by the media, especially in the UK, but they are still dealing with some of those things. And so having a very, very expensive backup goalkeeper, that's also one of your captains, might just be what they have to eat this year. And so, again, it might be Szczęsny who just doesn't sign that renewal. So I've changed my tune on this a little bit, but how do you find the Ter Stegen situation playing out? Is this me putting way too much thought into this?
Yeah, it's tricky to tell. I mean, Ter Stegen has been a good servant. I mean, he's been there for a decade now, done very well until the kind of last couple of years where you can kind of debate his performance a little bit more, but settled in, learned Catalan, lived in the city. He's done everything that you could have possibly asked from him, really, to be perfectly honest. And then you kind of touched on one of the things, the unknowns that could kind of swing this one way or another, I think. And that's, we don't know if he's had a conversation with Julian Nagelsmann, or if Julian Nagelsmann has given him an indication of whether he will start for Germany, regardless of if he's playing or not. I'm sure Ter Stegen would back himself to win the starting job, just because naturally you have to have that kind of level of confidence as a footballer, as a top level footballer. And you saw that with kind of him hinting that perhaps he would like to be in the Champions League squad again when he kind of recovered, when he returned to fitness. That didn't go down well with some people, but it speaks to his kind of confidence in his own ability. And to be honest, the first kind of few games of the season, he was absolutely fine. I think he was doing pretty well for Barcelona, early doors, it has to be said. So yeah, I think that's the unknown, is how much of a role will that play? I think the Neuer factor is another thing. The fact that Ter Stegen has been forced to sit on the bench for Germany for so long, and he finally gets his opportunity. Neuer finally retires, and then there's the prospect of it being taken away from him. But another kind of variable as well is is there really a job out there for him? Is there a starting job at a big club that will give him more kudos than it will being the kind of backup at Barcelona? We're not necessarily sure. So yeah, there's a few different factors and unknowns that we're kind of dealing with here in terms of what Barcelona can do to kind of shift Ter Stegen out. But we know the Barcelona playbook with these things. And for once, I just wish Barcelona would have an honest conversation with someone they want to leave and say, look, we have this goalkeeper in, this is what we think we're going to do going forward. If you want to leave, that's okay. If not, we can't force you out. But this is cards on the table, what we're doing, as opposed to putting it through the media, putting it through the kind of the washing cycle of, it's maybe some character concerns, maybe in the dressing room he's not a good influence. So yeah, there's bits and bobs here that I think, yes, I just wish Barcelona would be honest with some of their players for once and for all.
Well, there are players that are on social media and aren't. He is one of those that clearly is on social media and does pay attention to some of it. And to your point, yes, if the club behind the scenes is dangling that, maybe Ter Stegen deserves more blame for the Champions League stuff, and they dangle that to the piranhas on the internet, you actually know what's happening. And I've said this before, that I'm not trying to defend the mistakes that Ter Stegen has made, but it's revisionist history that, again, we're old enough to remember. And again, I've been hosting the show long enough. It's not even like the distant past that it was Busquets' age and lack of speed was the problem in the Champions League. It was Piqué and his age and having his focus issues. It was the fact that Suarez and Messi together couldn't press. It was Jordi Alba being mentally weak behind the ears. And now it's Ter Stegen. So all the Champions League issues for the last 10 years, it just, the next player they want to see exit, with the exception of Messi, obviously, who is, again, almost impossible to blame for some of the Champions League issues that happened. But
even then, they tried. I mean, back to Barcelona, and his contract getting leaked. So yeah, there is nobody safe from this.
Right. So now I do feel it's a little bit of a revisionist history to take a guy who's been at the club for 10 years and has been a major part. Again, I take you back to the Ernesto Valverde La Liga trophies. That was a key factor. It really, in some of those years, was Messi, Ter Stegen in that order as to why Barcelona were getting through and winning the Liga titles when Madrid probably had a better side. And we're also winning Champions League at the same time. Okay, so now time for Nico Williams. But before that, I have another question for you, Rory. Having watched Barcelona so much this past season, because I think it does lead us into the Nico Williams and forward conversation we're about to, what, having watched them, do you think are Barcelona's actual transfer needs, in your opinion? Because goalkeeper was certainly one of them, and I was yelling that since like October and kind of yelling that from the mountaintops, even before the ACL injury to Ter Stegen, because you want to look to the future as well. But what are Barcelona's actual transfer needs to at least keep them at the level they're at, which is a Champions League contending, Liga winning side? But even if they're going to improve and solidify some of that depth, what do they need?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in terms of Garcia, just to finalize on that point as well, I don't think anybody considered it a possibility, but it was probably a need, and that's why it probably wasn't being talked about too much. But yeah, Garcia, if he can replicate 80% of what he did at España last season, will be a kind of needle shift for Barcelona. He will kind of take them to a different level, because really, I think, and again, his first 10 games for Barcelona will be very important, because if he can keep the air of invincibility he had at Espanyol, there were games where it just looked like it was impossible to get past him, and he would kind of take out these saves from nowhere. So I don't know how familiar or how many Espanyol games some of the podcast listeners watch, but yeah, he does have that highlight reel. Is not unjust to him. It really is legitimate to what his season was. So yeah, I think that was a big one. I think the fullback positions for me are still the most obvious and most pressing needs. I think Alejandro Balde, Gerard Martin, I know he had a good kind of Champions League semi-final second leg, but Gerard Martin is not kind of at the same level as the rest of the squad, frankly. And even Balde, I think Balde is a very good left back and one that you want to start. But if you could have a slightly more defensive option, a kind of slightly better performing Marcos Alonso, essentially, is what you want behind Balde. Someone experienced, somebody that can sit there. Not necessarily Marcos Alonso, because he was no great shakes at Barcelona, but the theory of him was kind of right, I think, in that regard. And similarly to Koundé, somebody to kind of contrast him, somebody that can kind of get beyond Lamine Yamal and kind of stretch the pitch a little bit more, somebody that's a little bit more kind of focused on the attack would be the kind of primary needs for me. And I guess there's so many questions with the construction. We'll come on to Nico and his fit as well, but Lewandowski is perhaps the second most obvious need, because he obviously scored 42 goals, but missed quite a few as well, missed some of the crucial games of the season. Ferran Torres did very well. Do you trust him as that kind of, to essentially take over from Lewandowski if that needs to be the case this season? I think that's probably the next big question mark. And if in this kind of wonder world fantasy land where Barcelona didn't have a salary limit, I'd probably say you want one kind of angry midfielder in there, a Roy Keane, somebody to just kind of go in and mess things up. And I know Marc Casado has that kind of little bit of aggression and bite, and I think that was important. I think Fermin Lopez has a little bit of that as well. Gavi too, somebody that has that, but with a little bit more physicality, somebody that can kind of bully the opposition a little bit would be handy. I think back to my kind of heart eyes, romanticized days of Sadie Keita, who was the very best at that. But
Sadie Keita is a player to my heart. I do have to actually push back a little bit on that last statement there, because Gabi last season was still recovering from that ACL injury, and I think this year on, I want to, like you said, Roy Keane, you said that bite, and my thought is I don't know how much crazier of a look in the eyes that Gabi has to have. I mean, like the kid is out of his mind, and I think another year returning from that injury, again, it can take a year, and I was trying to tell people throughout last season, it's fine. Like, this is a wash of a season, unfortunately for him. I know the club were asking things of him if they wanted to win the Champions League trophy and all those things, but like Gabi was able to, it was a perfect situation with Frankie de Jong and Costado coming out of the woodwork, even with Bernal's injury, that Fermin Lopez as well, continuing just, hey, I can start when you need me to, almost starts when he's healthy, all those things, that you can have Gabi this season or this past season reintegrated slowly. And I think this season, if he gets the full green light again, and I know he was healthy, but it's difference between healthy and trusting yourself with ACLs, and we know that. And we know that like is a time-honored tradition that you kind of have to go through it again and learn who you are. And so the only thing I push back on is that mentally, I mean, Gavi is a nutcase, and I really do I think he really could encapsulate all that bite. But to your point about left back, I've said it many, many times that I've actually argued. It's a funny thing because I get hate because I've argued that Gerard Martin, I think, would be a starting left back for 12 of the 20 teams in the Liga. But the problem is if you're in the Champions League or the Europa League and you're fighting in contention to Europe, just the level is different. And that is not Gerard Martin's level. And I've said it many times that the guy is not a complete bum or anything like that. He's a good left back who would start on most teams. But Barcelona, yes, they need to reinforce that position. The odd thing is it does not seem to be that it is a requirement for them at the moment. And we don't know, and I think we're going to see in the preseason just how much they like Jofre Torrens, who is a different profile than Gerard Martin. He's much more similar to Balde, but much more ball playing than he is drive the ball forward. So a lot more like ball at my feet as opposed to dribbling. Well, when I say ball, sorry, not ball to feet, the opposite of that, where he's going to try to play through as opposed to Balde, ball to feet, and then let's get off to the races. So they are different players, but he's also only 18 years old. So to put that on him is probably a bit unfair. But yes, Gerard Martin, I think defensively is kind of what Hansi Flick wants, is a backup left back who's defensive. I do also think when it comes to backups like that at positions, I think the dust will settle a little bit, right? Because I think right now you're seeing before JLI first a lot of transfer bidding wars. And I think at some point the musical chairs of left backs, which fullback is such a hard position because everybody wants one. Everybody wants a good one because if they're that good, then they're going to probably play in the midfield or they're going to play on the wing, right? They're going to play in other positions of need as opposed to just staying as fullbacks. But at that kind of position, yes, maybe there is somebody out there who we're not really thinking about that can just come in to very similar to Atletico Madrid, like a Javi Gailan kind of level. Like that is kind of like the level that you'd want to bring in. But it sounds like when Barcelona first considering him, he was asking for a bit too much on the wage bill. That Atletico Madrid they kind of slightly won that bidding war, and that's fine. And Barcelona also had to consider, hey, we're getting ourselves in other business and other bidding wars, which lead us to Nico Williams, which seems like a bidding war, but Barcelona, because of Nico Williams pushing for Barcelona, is only a bidding war against what Athletic Club are asking for. Because it does appear that we can believe that personal terms are done with the player. So all it is that the release clause, which Athletic Club have said, give it to us up front. We don't want installments. We don't want to hear anything like that. Give it to us as a large sum of cash, which Barcelona will have and will have. I mean, and at this moment does have. The issue is going to be registering with FFP, which again, I talked about on Wednesday. I have a very boring, like 12-minute explainer on the YouTube channel in the last podcast. Again, if you need something to fall asleep to, it's the FFP explainer that I went into. But from your perspective, as far as Barcelona not only having the money, but bringing that in and the things that you have heard, not only what are the hiccups of this, but I haven't really talked about the football side of this at all. I'm really just saying, all right, if Barcelona get this over the line and they can register him with FFP, which again, based on all the other pushing and pulling between the Liga and Barcelona, that this will happen. Right? All the other ones between Lewandowski and Koundé and Olmo and Pau Victor, Barcelona seem to always get it done. So I think there's just a lot of posturing, of course. I even had people in my comments where were telling me that I'm siding with Tebas and defending Tebas, which, yeah, exactly. That's where we're at. Just trying to explain something to somebody. I thought it might be challenging is me siding, but the club is optimistic about finding a solution. I do think that there is some kind of solution. Laporta also in his Senate meeting yesterday, or 2 days ago, I should say, was very confident. And sometimes he uses kind of amorphous words. And when he's overconfident, then I kind of side-eye him a little bit. But he seemed very confident and assured in the language that he was using. And in a way, when he seems to be tentative about things, that actually gives me more confidence. So when he said like a signing is imminent and things like that, it just gives you a little bit of confidence in that. Athletic Club, of course, pushing for Nico's renewal. I don't think it's going to happen. But I just kind of throw you out as far as the where you want to take this. Do you want to go to the football side of things with Nico Williams and where that fits at Barcelona? I don't really think there's much more to say about the financial aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was very on brand La Liga for Tebas and Laporta to state the exact opposite things. Laporta saying that we are in the spending limit and we can sign as normal. And Tebas, less than 24 hours before, saying Barcelona are not in their salary limit. He did say that they need to do less things or they were closer to kind of getting enough there to get Joan Garcia over the line and registered. Nico Williams, he mentioned that sales would be needed. And I think that's the big question, is because there's so much hypothetical. I mean, the reports that I've been kind of translating and going through are saying that Barcelona don't need to make a big sale if they sell these 7 players or these 6 or 7 players. But then obviously that's hypothetical on how much you're getting for those players. And to wrap up on the kind of finances of it, I look forward to August 15th when Lewandowski gets a contract extension to reduce some of his wages and spread them out again. And we get 39-year-old Lewandowski.
Don't do
this. But yeah, I think on the football side, he is an interesting transfer. I think it's a transfer that speaks to perhaps Barcelona's consciousness and awareness that Rafinha is at his peak and might not be able to produce that again, or at least at the very least, he'll need more rest and more kind of rotation to be able to do so. Similarly with Lamine, I think a dosing of his minutes will come. I think you saw in kind of the back end of last season, there was times when they were asking quite a lot of Lamine and kind of relying on someone so young. I mean, we've had that debate about a million times, and how much do you use him? How much do you rely on him? And I think Barcelona have made peace with the fact that they have to rely on him in these big games and they have to rely on him week in, week out, but giving him those rests where they can. Whereas this year, Ferran Torres wasn't really convincing on the kind of right or the left. He was good for the middle, but wasn't really used out wide that much for Hansi Flick at least. And beyond that, you were kind of sticking Fermin Lopez or Dani Olmo out wide. Dani Olmo not so much, but yeah. So I think you could see a clear need for kind of a winger. I think he's somebody that stretches the game for Barcelona, and that's kind of the big green flag for this signing, because yeah, he is somebody that will stick to the touchline and then come in, whereas Rafinha quite often drifts inside much more frequently and wouldn't really stick to the left at all. He was more or less a second striker, and you wonder if this also looks at not only giving Rafinha more rest, but giving Lewandowski time on the bench, frankly, with Rafinha perhaps up front as a number 9, because even though I think it was good for Barcelona to have that reference point for Lamine and Rafinha to kind of pivot off Dani Olmo, another one, I think that might be the next kind of image in Flick's brain is, can we do this with Olmo or Rafinha or someone more mobile? And then maybe Lewandowski is who you put on for the last kind of half hour to kind of put the goals away when you need them in the box. But yeah, can we do this with kind of a slightly different look of attack?
Yeah, I like the idea that the club have kind of admitted that, and you mentioned the Lewandowski extension as well, that next summer is the striker summer. And I, with the way that they're building this, again, reinforcing the goalkeeper position at the moment, it does feel like I do like Barcelona's transfer timeline at the moment. That you kind of are pushing that can down the road and saying, Lewandowski, that's a problem that we're not going to solve this year, because the dude also had 42 goals last year. So to your point, if they are looking at a false 9 situation where you can have Rafinha play there or Olmo play there, then you're saying, all right, as long as we get to what is the magic number, and if Lewandowski even gives us 30 goals next season or 25 goals, and you can phase him off to the bench a little bit, which it's something that he may not be down for and may not love, and maybe that isn't what Barcelona need and what's going to happen there. But if it does, it seems like this season Barcelona can win. It's not a matter of them surviving that idea, but they can win with that idea. Now, Marcus Rashford is interesting too, because the reports are that he would come and want to be a backup striker to Lewandowski, or he can play on the wing and all those things. And people are obviously saying that the Nico deal and Marcus Rashford are independent. But I'm personally just not totally sold on that. That's because when I look at the timelines, I say that Tony Fernandez may not be ready this season. Ibrahim Diarra, we don't know he's going to be. But I think the preseason could be very telling for Barcelona, because, again, going to South Korea and Japan will be likely Ibrahim Diarra, Guy Fernandez, Tony Fernandez, and these kids that are not ready, but they're not being ready to thrust into a starting role, of course, but they might be able to give you 10 to 15 games a season, which is all they might be necessary for. And it might be a similar thing that Marcus Rashford would have given you. And so at 40 million, which is what Man United wanted, like, I don't want to get into the business of Manchester United. That is something that I don't know. It doesn't give me any confidence.
That said, I mean, Manchester United's record of getting rid of players and then performing brilliantly is really quite good at the moment. So yeah, that would be one to look at. And I think another thing you can kind of look at for the Rashford deal potentially is that this is a deal that kind of suits everyone, because Villa seem to be the only one moving strongly for Rashford. Rashford, he keeps this option open. I think from a player point of view, if you're Rashford, you think, just get me to Barcelona and then I can kind of battle it outside, back myself against Ferran Torres. Even Nico Williams maybe thinks that he can kind of beat him out for a place with kind of more continuity. So from Rashford's point of view, you think, get me to Barcelona. From the agent's point of view, you think, let's drum up more interest. Let's keep this kind of going. From Barcelona's point of view, in case Nico does collapse, I think you keep this on the back burner as well. And maybe I think for Barcelona, the only deal that really makes sense is a loan with an option to buy, as opposed to actually spending 40 million on him. I don't think that makes much sense. I don't think it really, to be fair to Deco, I don't think it really fits into what he's done so far in terms of spending and age profile. So yeah, I think it makes sense for this deal to be kept alive by everyone. And just on that Lewandowski point, I saw quite a good report. I think it was from Mundo Deportivo, to be fair. And they were kind of looking at Lewandowski's goals, and I think it was about twice the rate he scored at during the first half of the season compared to the second. Yeah. And so if you're looking at that as Hansi Flick, you're thinking either we need somebody that can put away those goals in the second half of the season, or we need to make sure that Lewandowski can get to that stage of the season in the same frame that he was during the kind of first few months of it. So
this is the third year. This is now the third season that drop-off is happening for Lewandowski. So it's not like he is aging in the fall. It's that he ages over the course of the season, right? And so if he comes in being the same Lewandowski for the first half of the season, great. But to your point, yes, now it's how can we get just a consistent outlook, like even output, even if you subtract 5 or 7 goals from the first half of the season and you can add those to the second half of the season, that would be ideal.
Yeah, and you need them less in the kind of 5-1 wins over Mallorca, for example, than you do against Inter, which is ultimately that's the one game, Barcelona essentially, and that's a kind of benefit and a really nice position to be in. Is Barcelona looking at this and saying, how can we get better to get to that one game in a better position? So yeah, I think there's very few areas there's areas to kind of improve for Barcelona. There's kind of obvious holes to fill, but you're improving on a good base as well. And I think the two areas that Barcelona will look at is that stage in November, December, where they kind of struggle to get past those low block teams, the semi-final against Inter, and then a third possible potential area. I think Flick is probably going to want a little bit more defensive stability, because repeating the season that they just had going forward, I think could be quite difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Again, Inigo Martinez, expecting him to stay at that level is a big, big ask as he ages as well. So big sale wise, this is the last little segment we got here. Easy question for you. The Oro Romeu market, I've heard 50 million. Is that true? 75? I know the Barcelona need a big sale. So is it Oro Romeu for 75 million? I've heard. Oh, right. Real Madrid need a holding midfielder. Of course. I mean, Romeu could make some history. So yet no market for 75 mil for Oro Romeu, I'm assuming. That's not the big sale that Barcelona.
Maybe you could sell him to Chelsea again, even if you could get 10, 15 million from Chelsea again the second time round. If he was only a few years younger, Chelsea would probably give you a good whack of money for him. But
oh, that's true. Right. If he was a 17-year-old from Brazil, Chelsea would be, they'd be all in. So between Ansu Fati, the Monaco deal still not done, and it's now in a place where it could fall apart, which is pretty negative. And I think we're kind of already assuming that he's part of the big sale for Barcelona. At least it'll be a loan, but his wages will be off the books. And again, a reminder that Barcelona don't need the money for his transfer, but yes, his transfer would create more of a wage limit. And I know this is all confusing things, but so yes, selling him would help raise the wage limit. But in terms of the wage bill, getting his wages off of the current FFP would help them to register all the players now. Okay, so that's the simple thing about Ansu Fati. And I kind of want to say, when you hear it leaked in the media, what is a big sale? And we hear Araujo, we hear Christensen, but when you hear big sale for Barcelona, what do you hear? Like, what names or what ideas in your head are you saying big sale? Because it sounds like a player they don't want to sell, but it doesn't sound like any of the players they don't want to sell, in Cubarsí, Pedri, Lamine Yamal, Gavi. It feels like Barcelona very much, if they didn't have to sell those players then, I can't imagine they have to sell them now. That they feel like they are out of the woods of that idea of like, they must have a big sale to register players. But again, how do we define big sale?
Yeah, it's a player that they'd rather keep, I guess, I think is the definition of this. I mean, Araujo is the one that I think he's made his position very clear that he wants to stay, and he will try and do that at all costs. So I think you're kind of fighting a losing battle. And the other one is Fermin, who his name keeps popping up. I mean, again, given that I cover a lot of transfer rumors, I think every month, twice a month for the last 3-4 months, Fermin Lopez's name pops up with, it's been Saudi Arabia first, then Chelsea, Manchester United, Bayern Munich. So somebody is putting that out there, and I don't think it's Fermin Lopez and his agent, so it's probably Barcelona. So yeah, I think he's the one that you probably keep an eye on because they're so well stocked in that area. The fact that if Nico Williams does come, then perhaps Rafinha moves inside and plays behind Lewandowski. He did that a few times this season anyway, with extra players kind of coming on the left-hand side. So yeah, I think he's the one that you look at if you're Barcelona and say he's expendable is a really terrible and ungrateful term to Fermin Lopez for what he's done and for how good he's been and for how good he is, for how good he could be. So, but he's the one that you look at and say, positionally, we're covered. Do we have the space for him to kind of really develop in the next kind of 5-10 years or 5 years, even shorter than that, 2-3 years? Perhaps not.
Well, you're right, because you look at him and say, this might be his ceiling in this team with the amount of minutes he has. And because of the low wages he currently has, again, he's just beautiful in the wage bill. When we talk about wages and stuff, Fermin Lopez, but very much like all young, good players that score goals and are in Champions League semifinals, he's the price will come for him, and Barcelona have to pay that. They'll have to pay a big contract extension for him, and that is coming. So the moment to get rid of Fermin Lopez is preemptively. It's probably 2 years before, which is now 2 years before you would actually want to get rid of him or have him be disenfranchised with his minutes or anything like that. You sell him when you can get 75 million for him or 65 mil, and somebody's saying, hey, we're going to actually foster him into the player that we want, which is a player that's going to score 12 to 14 goals from that attacking midfield position. And, now we're looking in hindsight at the Olmo signing from last season and going, well, now it feels like Barcelona last summer had a chance. Do we choose Olmo by signing him, or we choose Fermin Lopez for the future? And again, I mentioned all the other attacking 10s that Barcelona have potentially in Tony Fernandez, in Guy Fernandez, in Ibrahim Takara, who is still very young, yes, but they do have other young players that in theory play the exact same position because some of the best prospects in La Masia are also playing the 10. And as you mentioned, with Rafinha, and if you're going to bring in Nico Williams, Lamine Yamal can also probably play the 10, and who knows what kind of chaos that unlocks.
Yes, that sounds a little bit scary, but yeah, and on Fermin, Fermin has what he has is something that you can't really buy too often on the market, and I think that's the thing that would be so difficult for Barcelona, because not only is he very good, he's got a very good shot, but that kind of aggression and attacking player is quite hard to come across. Somebody that will press that rapidly, for want of a better word, and somebody who is that kind of committed to his side. And I think Gavi is another player that gives you that, but usually those players like Gavi are better off kind of further down the pitch and a little bit deeper. So yeah, having somebody that kind of excels in the final third, is that aggressive, attacks the ball that well. The things that he does aren't necessarily as pretty as other players. And so I think that's perhaps where you get a little bit of an undervalued aspect of Fermin. But yeah, he is the obvious sale that has to be said.
Yeah, and then again, Araujo, as we know, 65 mil now for him, so that will be dipping July 1st. But it does seem like if he wasn't gone in January, then maybe he's just going to stick this out. And as I said, Inigo Martinez, I cannot imagine that. I think that competition between Inigo Martinez and a healthy Araujo, because again, I also defend Araujo and say he missed the first half of last season, and to then learn a new system and to kind of get himself up to speed. No, he'll never be the man that we want him to be with the ball at his feet. But there are definitely worst case scenarios for him. And the last 4 or 5 months might have actually been that worst case scenario for him. And maybe with a preseason, a little more time, that Hansi Flick can kind of do what he did for Ferran Torres and even Rafinha. It's hide their issues and take what makes them good as players. And once again, kind of give confidence to those things and boost those players up. Because again, Ferran Torres, we almost got a best case scenario for him this past season. And maybe, again, if that Midas touch or that gold touch happens for Araujo, then again, Barcelona have a top, 5 1v1 defender in world football?
Yeah, absolutely. And something I wanted to mention a little bit, kind of just previously, going back to kind of fullback discussion. Fullbacks, especially because they're up against wingers, but also centre backs. I think it's such a hard position to come in cold to do that job and to go up against these kind of the best strikers in the world, the best forwards in the world. I think it's so hard to come in without kind of the sharpness that you get from playing week in, week out as a defender. I think both your instincts and your reading of the game are the things that need to be sharpest to be effective. And so if you come in and you've played 30 minutes here and there every kind of couple of weeks, then that's going to be really, really difficult for you. And I think a good example of that is Luca Dean, who Atleti are looking for as a potential left-back recruit this season. Luca Dean, who was probably, he is better now than he was when he came to Barcelona. He is more rounded and more confident, obviously, but he was the perfect kind of backup left back signing to Jordi Alba when he came. But just because of that lack of confidence, the fact that he won't get the game time, I think he never really hit the ground. He didn't really get off to a running start. So yeah, I think that's something that probably Flick values about Gerard Martin, is how effective he was at coming in cold. But it's also something very difficult to get right if you're a defender.
Yeah, the other thing too is Gerard Martin. If we're surmising that all players are equal to their contracts and they have to perform based on those contracts, it's an argument I've made many times that De Jong, there is no possible way that De Jong can give you a performance as the Eagles contract. But actually, if you look at what Gerard Martin did last season and you look at where he fits in the wage bill, Barcelona probably got 100 times, well, maybe not 100 times, but like they got 10 times for the amount of money they were paying him, the performances that he gave you, So that's, again, a difficult part of this where you're trying to balance players who, again, Eric Garcia, the reason why I say absolutely that guy has to be sticking around because he struggled enough where his contract is not going to break the bank for you. I think he makes $6 million a year, which is perfect for a guy that did not actually have that much of a drop off when it came to Koundé going out in the latter half of the season. Because I really do think of that the Inter matchup, and I say not having Lewandowski, that was something that was untenable. I don't think Barcelona could really recover that. And then Balde was the other one that Balde and Lewandowski being gone is, I think, one of the main reasons why Barcelona did not manage to get past them into the final. And I look at the other side at right back and go, well, actually, Eric Garcia was not why. That Koundé's missing was not why Barcelona didn't get to the final, which is, again, just not a dig on Koundé, but a compliment to the highest order of Eric Garcia. As I said, if he makes $6 million, that is just exceptional. That's exactly what you want from a guy who can also play at defensive midfielder. And also, I know Christensen doesn't want to leave, but also makes Christensen surplus requirements as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And more impressive almost from Eric Garcia, because I think against Inter, bearing in mind he did a very good job, but he was also up against DiMarco, who was just having the most nightmarish couple of weeks of his life against Lamine Yamal. Garcia did a very good job against Inter, but against Vinicius and Mbappe, he also did a very good job the following week. And even though Barcelona were pretty comfortable and pretty handy in that game, didn't actually have to do that much defending after, what was it, the 17th minute when Real Madrid stopped touching the ball in Barcelona's half. But yes, I think Garcia coming up against Vinicius and Mbappe and kind of holding up was the most impressive part of that, and probably has been the thing that shifted Barcelona's priority away from that position. Even if I still think it's someone, again, I'm talking utopia world, you probably have a right back by definition, but now Garcia makes sense there as well. But Garcia's in the team next season.
Well, I'd also hope that, again, Hector Fort still exists, and I know that he may go elsewhere because of not having game time, but also Hector Fort could just be the guy. Like, he has very high potential, and he has looked like a 18, 19-year-old fullback, but again, he's an 18 or 19-year-old fullback, so just everybody relax. He may not fit the timeline, but he also might. You never know. Injuries happen and the like. And speaking of players trying to break through, the last little note here is after 13 years at the club, Alex Garrido is heading to Eibar, and Eibar did not get promoted. This is where they did not get promoted. That's right. It was Levante. The colors in my head. Levante are the ones of the same colors coming back, correct? Not Eibar. So he goes to the second division to Eibar after being the captain of Barca Athletic and 13 years at the club. That's why I mention it. Did get to make his first team debut in April 2023 under Xavi, so that's awesome. I always want all these kids to get on the field. Just make your appearance at the Camp Nou. Very exciting for you. Congratulations to him. And again, hopefully he succeeds. But we also have known with injuries to him in the last 2-3 seasons that it just wasn't going to work out at the top level. And that does wind up not only wrapping up this show, but helps me to promote next week. midweek, I'm going to be doing, Arsene will be back, and we are going to be doing our La Masia every 6 months, our little check-in, because again, teenagers, Rory, they get better a lot quicker than guys in their late 20s and 30s. So like if we had updates with the, Lewandowski from, well, I don't know. If you're on the other side of it, it's different. But anyway, you get the point. From Jules Koundé, what are we doing in with check-ins? But when it comes to La Masia kids, they turn from 15 to 16. You're like, oh, that's a different. Actually, that's now like a different body. That's a different player. That's a different person.
What you're saying, Dan, is that we're past our prime.
I'm definitely past my prime. I told a story a few weeks ago, and I'll repeat it now for the podcast audience too. I was playing in a tournament up in Boston. Again, this is ultimate frisbee, not football. And we were playing a bunch of kids from Quebec. And this kid, he was probably 20 years old, 21 years old, flying through the air, flying around me. He he lays out, so he goes horizontal, gets the disc. Disc is still floating. I had to play on it, went to go clap catch it, and then his legs wind up wiping me out. Totally erased me. And I roll on the ground, maybe a little too dramatically. This is my musical theater background. I'm rolling a little bit too dramatically, maybe on the ground, but I was just surprised because I bent in a way that I was like, oh, how are my ACLs both intact? How's my MCL? Check my ankles, right? And I had that moment where I was like, this might all be over in this moment. And then because of maybe it's the gray hair, I do wear a hat when I play so people don't see it, but maybe it's the gray hair a little bit. My teammates, the younger ones, were like, oh, he's dead. He's done. We have to get him off the field. Like, the woo, bring over the ambulance. But then I got up and I checked. I was like, it's okay. And then he starts arguing with me in French. And then my French is just good enough to say, no. Like, you fouled me. I know that great job being young, but you fouled me after the fact. So yes, am I over it? Not yet, Ruri. I'm holding on to the dream. But yeah, these young kids, any day now, one of these kids is going to wipe me out. So hopefully I can edit the show and get it out before tomorrow. We've got another tournament, in like upstate New York. So it's a lot of driving just for a bunch of kids to give me headaches and bruises and things the next day. But Rory, so that's what I've got going on. It's a La Masia show midweek with Arsene next week. So that's something that people always get excited for and look out for. What do you have going on at Football España and the like?
Yeah, we're kind of covering obviously the summer transfer window. We're just doing kind of season reviews for every team in La Liga currently. The Barcelona one is out, so you can come and shout at me in the comments section. It was myself that did it, so I have no place to hide. But yeah, we're doing season reviews at Football España, and we'll be covering the Club World Cup, so you can maybe do a bit of hate watching if you're a Barcelona fan on the Real Madrid side of things.
Hey, I mean, Vita Roque. Check them out. Palmeiras. There's a lot of former Barca players doing their thing. So maybe, I don't know. The buyback on that, I can't imagine the numbers to get him back from Palmeiras, but they believed in him once. I don't know. It's not gonna happen. Anyway, that's nonsense for another day. So Ruri, thank you so much again for joining the show. Reminder everybody to get down in the description or the show notes, check out Football España and what Rory's got going on all his different social medias. And then again, for this, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can still help me out on Patreon through the off season. Give a good rating on the podcast apps. Follow me on social media, all that stuff. Again, I will repeat it. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, just do that. Or become a member for free, and become a member for free on Big Up as I have those streams throughout the off season. Yeah, I'm not doing as many, but we are 3 weeks away from preseason already. So I will already, at different weird times of the day, have the tour throughout Asia for the preseason, again, in like 3 weeks' time. So make sure you're subscribed on Big Up because the new season will be here before we know it. Rory, in the meantime, get some rest. Just enjoy your time on your mini vacation, if you want to call it that. And for everybody else, Forza Barca.